Hello everyone and welcome to the round glass review for the Canon RF 50mm f1.8 STM. Canon released this lens in 2020 and the production, insofar as I can tell, is still ongoing. I have to imagine this lens will be available new for quite some time given how important a budget 50mm lens is to any camera system. Typical lens uses will include general use on a full frame and also as a portrait lens on APS-C, which this lens will be exceptional at. For your bottom line up front, if you want to start out in the Canon RF system and get just one lens, this is the one. The Canon RF 50mm f1.8 STM is an incredible lens, and one of the best. Actually, thinking about it, it is probably the best 50mm f1.8 lens that I have ever used. And yes, I've used a lot of those. Even more if you include f1.7 and f1.9 lenses in that category. For your focal length and AOV, they are 50mm and 46 degrees on full frame, 80mm and 30 degrees on Canon APS-C. Aperture range is 1.8 through 22. Element and group count are 6 and 5. The design type is double-gauss. Filter size is 43mm, which is so incredibly tiny. The closest focus is 30 centimeters, which in the US is exactly what I always say a good 50mm lens should have as the closest focus point. Bravo, Canon. The drive type is autofocus with a stepper motor or fly-by-wire manual focus. The native mount is Canon RF. Dimensions are 69 by 40mm and the weight is 160 grams. So first up, this lens performs beautifully on both full frame and APS-C. On the latter, it exhibits no light loss and corner-to-corner sharpness. As a portrait lens on APS-C, it could be an ideal option. On full frame, it's a wonderful general use lens. Second, for videographers, the autofocus motor on the 50mm f1.8 is audible while focusing for photos. And that was true on every copy of this lens that I tried, which was 2 or 3 of them. The sound that it makes is a whining, slightly grating noise that corresponds to motor speed. And by the way, yes, I do know that I did try different copies of this because one of the copies of this lens that I tried fell down a waterfall. So at least the one after that was a different copy of it. Anyway, the autofocus sound that this lens makes is audible when using the camera and should then therefore be audible with on-camera audio when you're recording video. Lastly, my best tip is that this is definitely the first lens to get for a full-frame EOS R mount camera. Were I to buy one EOS R lens for my RP, it would be this one. Performance from this lens is staggeringly good. The full-screen photo shows that the astigmatism is visible in the corners. It's present, but looking at the real-world sample photos in this video, I honestly didn't notice it too much until I put this section together for this video. It's visible in close focus photos shot wide open, but I would not call it intrusive. A quick look at the center 100% crop shows a very good sharpness and some chromatic aberration entering near the edge of the APS-C image area. Scrolling around the corners at 100%, we can see astigmatism up close and that it is uniform throughout. The very corners are the only parts of the image that are really affected, and that shows up in a few of the full-frame images in this video. This is a really interesting double-gauss lens with optical halves that don't look equal, but based on this lens's performance, they seem to be, at least from an optical perspective. This is a great design, and it shows how good a double-gauss lens can be, and that consumer-grade double-gauss lenses can perform in a manner that look to be very good even by professional lens standards. This is the benefit of a double-gauss lens, and that design being so well engineered and studied over the years that something this good can be developed and made for as low a price as it commands. Breathing is a bit stronger than I expected for this lens. I had it in my head that the relatively short register distance compared to the focal length would affect breathing in a positive manner. Apparently not. Over a throw of 0.7 meters, this lens breathes a decent amount. The aperture is controllable on the camera in third stop increments. The front element is non-rotating but does move in and out significantly. Focus damping is not applicable because this camera uses fly-by-wire focus control that will likely take a little bit of getting used to. The autofocus effect on audio, as talked about a little bit in the tips section, it's there, and all 3 copies of this lens that I used had a whine in their focusing gears. Sharpness is excellent, and this lens holds up on both Canon RF formats, which is to say full frame and APS-C. Center sharpness is stunning, and that, by and large, holds to the very edges. You have a lot of freedom to compose images as you see fit, and this lens can back that composition up with good image quality. Build quality is good, and I like a lot that Canon is releasing small, light primes for the EOS R system. Also, it's very nice to see that they tend to be the same size as each other, or, at minimum, have the same cosmetic design and approximate size across the consumer tier family. Contrast is very good in camera, and that shows in the richness of the colors this lens produces. Aperture stars for in-focus point sources start to appear at f4, and out-of-focus area stars lag a bit, not appearing until f22. Stars at f11 and f16 are the best, and there's a nice amount of definition and clarity in the 14-pointed stars. Out-of-focus areas are lovely at basically any aperture, but especially so with focus points in the portrait range and closer, and apertures at f4 and wider. Distortion compared to other lenses in this price class and performance spec is basically 0. This is an exceptional distortion performance, and this lens hits well above its weight class here. Light loss is pronounced wide open and to f2.8. At f4 it's almost entirely gone, and then by f5.6 completely gone. With very slight light loss re-enters at f16 in real-world use, as opposed to when photographing a white screen at infinity focus. The light loss from this lens is quite pleasant and adds a lovely image character to most scenes. Flare never manifested for me, and that owes to the overall lens housing design and coatings. Ghosting, like flare, never manifested for me, even in these very harsh test shots. This lens controls internal reflections exceptionally well, and I have to imagine that backing up the lens's superspectra coatings are some good internal light damping materials or structures inside of the lens's housing. Balance with cameras is good on the light cameras. I use this lens on the RP, R100, R50, and R7. I suspect that it would feel front light on the heavy EOS R full-frame cameras. The Canon EOS R 50mm f1.8 STM lens proves a key photographic tenet. A good double-gauss 50mm lens in the f1.8 class should be the foundation of any modern camera system. With this lens, Canon absolutely released a price-reasonable performer that every other camera system should look at and try to best. The Canon EOS R 50mm f1.8 STM is the standard bearer for 50mm f1.8 lenses on mirrorless systems. Probably, honestly, also on DSLR and SLR systems, because I don't know of a single 50mm f1.8 lens I would rather use. I will argue that it's not easy to develop a lens that performs well as a generalist on full frame and a specialist-meets-generalist on APS-C. Sure, every 50mm lens on the market can try and do that, but if there is another one that does so as well as this lens, I'm unaware of it. What do I mean by that? Many APS-C sensors are more demanding than their full-frame sensor equivalents due to the smaller pixel size and greater enlargement ratio needed to reach the same final image. Those smaller pixels and the greater enlargement highlight every flaw a lens delivers. APS-C lenses tend to hold up a bit better on that format than do similar-spec full-frame lenses, because APS-C lenses on APS-C are working in the manner in which they were engineered. This lens shows a focus on providing an affordable, fast prime optic that can be used well on all EOS R cameras and by even the most demanding photographers. So I'll say again what I said early on. If you want an EOS R camera and one lens, this is the first one to look at, and for many users, could very easily be the one that lives on the camera.